Hi guys, welcome this afternoon. This is a recorded video for you to watch about your social studies assignment called Celebrated Abolitionists of the 1800s. So I'm going to run through what you're going to need to do. So let's take a look. I'm in Google Classroom. There is an assignment called Celebrated Abolitionists of the 1800s. I click on that and view my assignments. It says directions, reread the section of your Ohio Studies Weekly, week 8, called Celebrated Abolitionists of the 1800s. It is on the inside of your newspaper at the bottom. Fill in the tables below about each of the 3 important abolitionists with 2 of their accomplishments. Those are things that are important that they did in their lives, and 1 quote that they said or a document they wrote. So if I open that up, that's directly the quotes the directions I put in the slides, I'm sorry. And we're talking today about Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Sojourner Truth. So on the second slide, you will see you have 2 accomplishments per each person and the famous quote they said or the document they wrote. I'm going to go ahead and reread that section. And hopefully it'll help you find some of the reasons that you can put. Also, you can just read this on your own if you would like. So we have celebrated abolitionists of the 1800s. Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was born in Maryland on a plantation in 1818. As a child, he was sold away from his mother at the age of 7. He never knew his father. Douglass taught himself to read and write. That is an accomplishment, I would think. This was a big accomplishment since enslaved children weren't allowed to go to school. Later, Frederick taught other enslaved people. He fought back when attacked by handlers. At the age of 20, Douglass planned his escape. He dressed like a sailor and boarded a northbound train where when he arrived in New York, his mission appeared to be a success. So he was able, so he taught other people and he planned his escape, dressed like a sailor, and boarded a northbound train and landed in New York. That can be an accomplishment. In New York, Douglass got a job as a laborer. He attended abolitionist meetings and got a job with the Anti-Slavery Society in Massachusetts. He was invited to speak about the abolitionist movement throughout the North and Midwest. He opened his home to people escaping slavery. He hid 400 fugitives on their way to Canada. That's another accomplishment. Because of the Fugitive Acts, slaves often fled to Canada. Once there, extradition was not a threat. At one point, even Frederick Douglass moved to Europe to avoid capture. His book, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, was the first that he published. I'm going to underline that. That is something he wrote. So I could go to my thing and say that that is a document he wrote. He penned it 7 years after his escape. He later wrote 2 other books. So he wrote a total of 3 books. That's an accomplishment. Mr. Douglass became an important leader and orator, meaning he gives speeches fighting for racial justice. Although Frederick Douglass died in 1895, his good deeds live on in monuments built in his honor. So I'm going to move on from that. If there's anything else you would like to include, there is more about Frederick Douglass on the first page, just a little bit, if you wanted to look for facts there. Our next person is Harriet Tubman. Another famous abolitionist was Araminta Ross, later known as Harriet Tubman. She adopted the name at the age of 13. Tubman was also an enslaved on a Maryland plantation. born in 1820. None of this is an accomplishment so far, right? She's just being born. One of 11 children living in a single room cabin. She was put to work at the age of 6, beaten by her owner and fed table scraps. Life was hard. Still, no accomplishments so far. She got in a serious head injury at the hands of a slave owner, from which she suffered for life with blackouts and dizzy spells. Escaping in 1849 to Pennsylvania, Tubman found freedom through the Underground Railroad. So that's an accomplishment. She escaped. Her freedom would soon be threatened with the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. That meant that any escapees living in the North could be captured and returned to slavery. That's what we're talking about when I said the word extradition over to the left, meaning that they could be captured and returned. The only way to overcome that law was for enslaved people to escape much farther north into Canada. Harriet Tubman assisted in that effort and became a conductor on the Underground Railroad. Her assistance was legendary. So she became a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She even got the nickname Moses, like the biblical prophet who guided his followers to freedom, leading 300 enslaved people to freedom. Tubman conducted a total of 19 escape trips. That's another accomplishment. Each journey meant she was putting her life on the line. However, she never got caught, and there was no loss of life. Years later, she would earn the titles of civil rights activist and nurse. So, while there's not a quote or a document, I will allow you to use maybe this last line, that she was given the title of civil rights activist and nurse. I will accept that as your answer. Our last page says Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was also began life in slavery. She was born under the name Isabella Baumfree in New York on a Dutch farm in 1797. Isabella spoke only Dutch early on. When she was sold to an Englishman, he would beat her because she didn't understand English and could not follow orders. Later, listening to others, she taught herself English. So that's an accomplishment. She taught herself English. Many people cannot teach themselves that. In 1825, Baumfree's owner told her that he would set her free. He reneged, which means went back on his promise, so she escaped. She stayed with her neighbors who considered slavery evil. They bought her from the Englishmen and then gave her her freedom. Soon after, in 1827, slavery in New York was outlawed. Once free, Isabella started working with abolitionists. She wanted freedom for people everywhere in America. In 1843, she changed her name to Sojourner Truth, which meant truth traveler. She felt that her name expressed her calling. It described her purpose to travel around the country, spreading what she believed to be God's word while denouncing slavery. So she traveled around the country talking about how slavery was a bad thing. Sojourner Truth was a thought-provoking speaker. She spoke about inequality and forged or shaped an important path towards justice. She also fought for the rights of women. So I can say she fought for the rights of women. In 1851, Sojourner Truth spoke at Ohio's Women's Rights Convention and gave the moving, now famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" So that is her famous document that I would write on my slide. All righty, guys, work on this. I've got at least 3 things highlighted for accomplishments for each person. Frederick Douglass, I have a little bit more underlined. So you have just 2 accomplishments you have to put and a famous quote that they said or a document they wrote, remembering that I told us that the Harriet Tubman, you could just say that she was deemed a civil rights activist and nurse. That would be fine with me. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye, guys.